We're live. It's going to be a little accident prone. First time I'm recording without Jared here to hold my hand. I am a Zoom recording noob. I know that is weird for a guy who's in his 40s, who's been around for a while, but here we are. It's been a hot minute because Jared's away on work. Nate's, is your schedule lighting up?
It is. We're just finishing our recruiting, so we're about good now.
We're about good. And the Angels last week heated up, winning six in a row, lost a couple now, but I mean, things are looking a little better. And the thing about the Angels right now, even though we haven't had a whole lot to talk about, I'm sure many of you could accuse us of being negative about the team, which is fair, by the way, a fair assessment of our view and probably the outlook. There are some bright spots. And as we head toward this trade deadline, Nate was the one, we call him Negative Nate, but Nate was the one, as he talked about what to talk about for this podcast, who pointed out, we do have some positives here to look at. And that is, folks, we actually do have a nucleus to this roster, guys to build around. And that's nice to have. Now you got to build around them. But let's talk about the people you're seeing step up, the players you're seeing step up. Your first guy, the one if you the one that pops out the most to you, Nate, who is it?
The Honestly, it's Logan O'Hoppe. I think he's played really, really well. I think he's earned himself a contract extension. Um,
Already.
yeah, no, I think you got to build around him, and I know most teams don't build around catcher; they build around shortstops and center fielders and things like that. And yeah, you have Zack Neto, who's playing really well of late as well, but I mean, you hear it from other guys. Taylor Ward mentioned it yesterday. Logan O'Hoppe's the captain of this team. You see it. He's come up with clutch home runs during that 6 game win streak, clutch hits, and he's really starting to take a little bit of a lead in the rotation too. You see some of these guys are getting better as they pitch more with Logan O'Hoppe. The interesting thing would be, what does a Logan O'Hoppe contract extension look like? You look at Keibert Ruiz, who signed with the Nationals, and you look at Sean Murphy, who signed with the Braves, and you kind of put those two together, because I don't think he has the pedigree of Sean Murphy yet, but he also is a little better than Keibert Ruiz. So maybe you put that thing together and find something. But I think, yeah, he's a good young piece, and he plays up the middle. Catcher, shortstop, center fielder are the big important pieces on teams. So I think he has been outstanding.
I'm gonna hot take this. I think he's better than Sean Murphy is right now.
I
Um,
would say he is, but when Murphy signed the contract and things like that, he
true.
had a little bit more of a pedigree, I guess.
I'm agreeing with everything you're saying, especially with Logan, the way he stepped up. I like his swing. I like how he just moves on the diamond. I like pretty much everything about him. I mean, if you could have a catcher who's hitting 260, 270, 20 home runs, 60 RBIs, and who leads your pitching staff, which is exactly what he's doing. Pretty close to this kind of numbers, which we'll put by the end of the year, maybe more. You can't frown on that. That is a guy you want to build around for 10 years. And the Angels really haven't had a number one catcher since Benji Molina.
Hmm. Yeah, it's been a
I
long
mean,
time.
it's been a long time. And Benji really controlled that stat, but I think Logan is a better offensive than Benji was. And even before Benji, I can't geez, who would be before Benji?
Yeah.
Um, it's
Then
been
you
a
then
long
you're really
time.
going back a long time. And the other thing about Ohapi is he's more athletic than Benji was too. Benji wasn't as fast around the bases, things like that. Like Ohapi is like an athletic catcher, so he could even move off of catcher if you needed to him eventually. Like he could probably play third base or a corner outfield if, let's say, the Angels got another catcher where it's like, hey, we'd rather save his knees. Let's let him
Yeah.
continue to hit and play another position. Like he's athletic enough to play another position. That's the other cool thing about him. That even just makes it even more like, yeah, it's okay giving him that 7 year contract extension and paying him up front.
So Brandon Marshall's had some great games in Philadelphia, ups and downs, but some pretty good games. And at the time, there were some question marks about the trade. I was happy about the trade, but we didn't know if it was going to pan out. Now, 2 years later, how do you feel about that trade?
Honestly, it went as fair as a trade as you could see. You don't see too many trades where like both sides can say they won. And I would say both sides could say they won this trade. Like the Phillies got an everyday center fielder who's played pretty well for them when he's been healthy, and the Angels got a young, controllable catcher that kind of fits their their new mode of like, hey, we have a young nucleus and he's a little bit younger, and just fits where they're trying to go. So I think it's pretty fair trade for both sides. I like the deal for the Angels. We obviously don't know if Marsh would have ever hit with the Angels because he credits a lot of his success to the hitting coach in Philly. But yeah, I think it was a really good trade for the Angels.
We'll come back to that one day. Talk about with a change because it makes you wonder. Now, you mentioned Zack Neto as well. Zack Neto has been turning it up of late, and we've been pretty happy with his development since he's come up. The team hasn't done well around him, but again, early guy you got, young, brought him up quickly, a guy to build around. Shortstop's a need a position. He fills that role. What now with him?
Yeah, I think with him, he's showing signs of maturing as he gets more games under his belt. Shortstop's not an easy thing to get used to in the major leagues. I think, um, and there hasn't really been anyone to kind of take him along and be like, "Hey, this is the way things go," which sucks for him. But he's getting better every single week. You're seeing the power. You're seeing the maturity with his swing too. Like he's even understanding that he can't just go out and go big leg kick every single AB. Like there, you're seeing him understand the game a little bit more. So yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to give him like the 8-10 year contract extension right now, but I think he is definitely a building block for this team and just one that you're continuing to watch as he continues to grow. Maybe he gets that contract extension here in a year or two, but for right now, I just want to continue to see him play every day and be healthy because I think that was a big thing with him as well as the back injury and some things like that. But now that he's going to get a chance to play a full, hopefully 150, 160 games and continue to work with Wash and get better, like who knows? Maybe this guy turns into one of the better shortstops in the league. I don't know, but at least he's going to be someone that you can stick out there and know that he's going to do his job and at least hit 270 to probably 250 to 270 with 20, 25 homers and play a good shortstop.
I lean more towards 20, but I'll still take that.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'll still take that. I also the one thing concerns me is how many times has he been hurt now? I think at least
I,
three.
I was gonna say two.
I think
He
it's a little
had
higher.
one injury, the back injury. Those were the two that I could remember.
He hurt. I want to say was it the rib last year? The rib or the wrist?
Wrist and lower back, and then the oblique, I guess. So he had
Yeah, that
three.
was a little oblique. So there's a little bit of history there. He might never get hurt again for all we know, but
Yeah.
that's something you're a little concerned about. Now we're getting to the rest of this roster, and you have guys you've kind of picked up along the way. Kevin Pillar, guys like that, guys won't be around forever, probably won't be around next year. Then you have guys who've been playing well. Luis Rengifo was seeing 317 as of entering last night, leading the league in hitting. Nobody saw that coming. He's shown flashes of being very good the last couple of years. I see him as well. Let's see. Is he a building block or is he a trading block?
For me, I think he's a trading block. I think there's things you could get for him that make sense for the Angels. I think you might be able to get a top 100 prospect for him. And the big thing with him, he only has a year and a half left of team control, which really doesn't fit where the young core is going. You have O'Hoppe and you have Neto that you're really trying to build around offensively, and they still have 4, 5, 6, 7 years still with the team before they even hit free agency. And you have Rengifo who's going to hit free agency. You're going to have to start to pay him. And what's a comparable contract to him? I think you're looking at something near the Chris Taylor market, which was about 22 million a year, which is a lot of money. And you got to hope that he continues to play the way that he's been playing. Um, he needs everyday at bats. We know that when he doesn't get everyday at bats, he doesn't play as well. I think it just makes more sense to trade him, get younger, and continue to build around this young core instead of continuing to throw money and put yourself in another Anthony Rendon, Albert Pujols situation. Not saying that he's that guy, but like you don't want him to get the 22 million and then 2 years into the contract you're going, man, we cannot wait for this 22 million to come off.
I think 22 is a little high for him. I think it's a little high. he's only really established himself in the last year or so, a little high. But I agree, year and a half. If you're going to trade, you're going to trade him now. You're not going to wait till next year. You'll get much less for him. You're going to trade him now, and then in the same context, you have Taylor Ward, who has played well this year. Scared the crap out of us the other day. That brought back memories. Um,
Yes.
but you got to move him, right?
Yes.
You
I
got
think there's not as big of a rush to move Taylor Ward as there is to move Luis Rengifo. He's got 2.5 years of team control. So you could move him next year if you would like. But again, he's a guy that I think you could get a lot for. Again, another top 100 prospect and a lottery ticket and maybe even another piece. So he's one that could really help with this farm system. And he plays a position that like the Angels seemed to have had decent players in the past. Like you mentioned catcher. We haven't had a catcher make an all-star team in forever. You mentioned we've mentioned Rendon at third base. The Angels really hadn't had an everyday third baseman since like Figgins or Gloss, like a legit everyday third baseman. You could say
Gloss.
Gloss. Like it's been a long time since they've been able to put like everyday guys out there. But outfield, it seems like they've always been able to have like a. They bring up Mike Trout. He's been good. Taylor Ward's been there for a couple of years. They had Upton for 5 years. Like they seem to have figured out outfield. Not that it's the best position they have, but it seems like they can figure out how to get guys to play the outfield and be a good piece in the lineup. So he makes a lot of sense to move and then give some guys a chance. And there's going to be some free agents too if you need to fill in with free agent needs.
And then there's Nolan Schanuel, who they just drafted last year. When you initially texted me about the show Core, I noticed you didn't mention him, and you've expressed certain feelings about him in the past. Where does Shanwell fit in all this? I'm not saying you can't, you're not going to really trade him now, but I mean, where does he fit in your view of where this franchise is going?
That's a good question because the draft that's coming up here soon. One of the best hitters in the draft for me is Nick Kurtz from Wake Forest. He also plays first base, and if he's available at 8, like I don't know how you can pass over him with the guys that are probably going to go ahead of him. You would assume if he's available at 8, JJ's already gone and Burns is already gone. All the top guys are probably gone at that point, and you're going to put yourself in a position where Perry's like, "Ooh, do I take the best college hitter in the draft available, which would be Kurtz, even though he plays first base like Nolan Schanuel?" And I think you have to, honestly, because there's no guarantees that Kurtz is going to be ready in a year or two. Like we just don't know. It could be one of those where he's like, man, he's just so good, we got to move him, or it could be, hey, we can actually let a guy develop in Double A and learn how to hit. Maybe it takes him a year and a half, 2 years. With Shanuel, he's 22, so he's still young. Hasn't really shown the power that you like. His OPS is like in the 600s, mid 600 level. He's hit 8 homers. Like there just hasn't been anything where you see it and you're like, oh my gosh, like this guy makes sense to keep around a long time. Like he hasn't really shown those flashes of, hey, I'm gonna hit 315 or 330, or yeah, I'm gonna hit 220, but I'm gonna hit 30 homers. Like there hasn't been anything there. He's kind of been an up and down guy for me. So I think he's one of those guys that you kind of ride out and find out, is he going to get better or is he just going to kind of stay where he's at? Because again, the Angels have been through this so many times with guys like Brandon Wood or Joe Adell, where it's like, hey, we've given them time. We finally give them opportunity. They haven't really proven that they're an everyday guy, and then they just kind of burn out. So I want to see where Shanuel. I want to see him
Well,
play two more years.
they rushed Brandon Wood.
They did, and
They, you know,
you,
they and
you
then
could
that
put
gave up
Shanuel
on
in
him
that
quickly.
same. Yeah, you could put Shanuel in that same.
Joe Adell, they never really gave him real. They messed up his development. Well, I don't even know if he'll ever be the guy we hoped he would be. But with Shanwell, there's historical comparatives. When I think of him, I think of the kind of hitter he is. I think eventually he will hit for average. Okay. He will never be a 35, 40 home run guy, maybe a 20, 25 home run guy. So now you start getting into Darren Erstad or Wally Joyner territory in terms of what kind of numbers you can put up. I think Joyner did 1 year and 30 plus, and that was it. He was really just kind of a 10, 15, 20 home run kind of guy. Is that really what you want from your first baseman, though? Your corner outfielders traditionally are your power centers. Now that's changed. You see a lot of second basemen and shortstops hitting for power now. But if your first and third baseman are hitting for power, odds are pretty good your lineup has issues. And that's been true the last how many years now? When was the
Yeah.
last time the Angels had a good first baseman, like a guy who was going to hit 35?
Pujols did right when they signed him.
That's
His
a
first
decade
couple
ago.
years.
Yeah.
I know that was 10 years ago.
And before
His
him,
first, yeah, like you can't even move on. I guess was the guy
and
before
then
him
Vaughn
that
got hurt. Yep. So, and then before him, no one. Third baseman, same problem. And then we wonder why this team has had issues the last decade. So, I mean, for Shanwell, let me ask this question. Assuming Shanwell, well, let's talk to our sponsors real quick and we'll come back with Shanwell. All right. So let's assume Shanwell does develop into that Wally Joyner, Darren Nurse, that kind of hitter. Guy who can hit around 300, can get 20 home runs. What do you do with a guy like that?
honestly the guy that you could comp him to right now too would be Luis Arias. Would obviously I don't think he'll hit for the same average that Luis Arias hit for last year because that was just crazy. But if he can turn into a Luis Arias where he's what's Arias hitting right now? He's hitting 312 with two homers. So like if he's able to put up those kind of numbers, like I think he's someone that can stick around. Arise has played first, he's played second. Obviously, he's an undersized first baseman, but when it comes to Schanuel, I think you just really need to see if he's able to develop into that. And you bring up a good point of, hey, can he survive on a team that wants to win when the first baseman's not actually raking like he should be, like most first basemen do. Um, I think if they're able to get some guys to pick up the slack in other positions, it's okay. Like if he's hitting seventh in this lineup or eighth in this lineup, it's okay. But when he's hitting one or five or six, that's where the problem is. But you really need to get that core and the guys around him to be able to let him hit seven or eight in the lineup. If it's a lineup that's going to be around him hitting in the top five in the order, then this team's never going to win.
I can be okay with 6. I'm not so sure it's going as low as 7. But if you have a guy who's hitting 300-ish, 290, 300, hits 15, 20 home runs a year, that's horrible. But again, I think about first base. I think about first base and I'm wondering if can he play somewhere else? One. Can he?
Uh, He
And
might be able to
you've
play
seen more than I have.
the place that you could put him is like left field, I guess. But he's a big guy, 6'4". He's not I don't think he plays anywhere else in the infield. The only other place that you would put him on the infield where you would be okay with the production is second base, but I don't see him as a second baseman. So it would be a corner outfielder, first base, and I don't really see him moving off of first base because he's just not fast enough. Like he's a slow-footed guy, so like putting him in left field, you want him to rake. Like it's that same question of like, hey, if you're gonna be a subpar defender in left, like you better be able to absolutely mash baseballs, and I don't see that happening.
If my memory serves me correct, the scouting report on him coming out of college is similar to that. He'll hit for average, won't hit a lot of home runs. So I'm just going back in time and thinking, what were the Angels thinking going and getting him? Unless they wanted a guy who would rake 15, 20 home runs, hit 290, 300. We'll take
He
300, by
did
the way.
Yeah, he did show a little bit more pop in college. I think he hit 25 homers at FAU's last year, which is a good number. Like you're looking at most college hitters right now, like the top guys in the draft, like most of them are hitting 25, 30. Like Tibbs is a potential first rounder who I don't really want, but he hit close to 30. So like he was in the range of like what big time power hitters are hitting in college. I think what the Angels saw is a guy who has good bat to ball contact, and he's going to move through the system quickly because he doesn't strike out. And that's all they really cared about because they were so gung ho on we need to put some pieces around Shohei Ohtani in order for us to win with Shohei Ohtani, in order for us to keep Shohei Ohtani. And We mentioned it. First base is a position they really haven't had anyone. So they were like, oh, he plays a position of need, which is never how you're supposed to draft. And he plays, and he'll be in the big leagues soon. And it was like, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me at the time of why you would go that route. I thought there were other guys like Kyle Teal was available, Jacob Gonzalez, Matt Shaw. Like there were a lot of really good pieces available that probably wouldn't have been in the bigs in 2 months like Schanuel, but they
Mhm.
probably would have been in the bigs in 10, 12 months. And that would have been very helpful for this core.
Now, this core, let's recap for everybody. Five things are brought up so far. You brought up Zack Neto. You brought up Logan O'Hoppe. That's your guaranteed core. We talked about Taylor Ward. He's the guy you trade. We talked about Luis Rengifo, trade. And then there's Schanuel kind of in here without a defined, but you're not going to trade him now.
No.
So you're going to hope he becomes
Yeah.
that core. Anybody else we can ponder?
Um, Offensively, I think Joe Adell's a guy that you see what the value is. It sounds like a lot of teams are interested in him. Um, Obviously, I'm not giving him away for nothing, but if you're gonna get something in return, I think it makes sense to move him. Mickey Moniak would be another guy that like you could move if it makes sense. But the interesting thing, I think they have a core on the pitching staff, which is something the Angels haven't had in a long time as well. Like you can really look at the young guys, and it's like Jose Soriano, who came back from his injury last night. He didn't pitch as good as he's pitched most of the year, but still he looks like he could be a good number 3 or 4 starter in this rotation. We're hoping to get Chase Silseth back soon, who I'm a big fan of. You have Detmers, who he might have figured it out in his last start. And then you got Caden Dana, who's going to be representing the Angels in the Futures game. Just got named the 91st prospect in Major League Baseball, which is awesome for the Angels. So that's a cool, like, 4 starting pitchers. Now you really got to go out and get an ace to really help these young guys get better. But you're starting to see, like, the team form. Now it's can you make the right moves and move a Taylor Ward, move a Luis Rengifo, get younger, and then make some good moves in free agency, which we really haven't seen out of Perry.
So that gets down to the kind of the crux of the conversation, though, because I mean, let's be honest, it's been a rough year. It's been a crap show. Um, and our listeners, you guys have heard us talk repeatedly about some of these things, and just it's been really just rough in terms of the what we're looking at. But the light at the end of the tunnel is this core. And here's the question: given the core you're seeing, let's say that Perry has a great draft. He makes a couple of these solid moves we're talking about that we think they'll make. How quick can this team turn around?
Um, I think you could be very competitive and put yourself in a chance to be like the Kansas City Royals of this year, where it's like, hey, you're on the brisk of being a playoff team. Maybe you don't make the playoffs. Maybe you end up losing and missing out, or maybe you have a decent showing and you're like that last wild card team. I think it's very possible for them to be there next year. You're going to have to be very good in free agency. You're going to have to get an ace, whether it's a Max Fried, whether it's a Corbin Burns, guys like that. You're going to need someone to cement this rotation. And then you're going to need a little bit of luck because we know the Angels seem to get hurt every year with Trout and Rendon and guys like that are always banged up. But you almost have to build the team around knowing that they're going to get hurt instead of hoping that they're going to be healthy. And if they can do that, they can put themselves in a position to be like Kansas City, where they're the last wild card team or the first team out, and maybe the Angels have enough prospects to go get somebody to go put them over the finish line. Um, Ideally, you're a legitimate playoff contender in 2 years. So not next year, but the year after. Was that 2026? Would be ideal.
That's ideal. So that's best case. All right.
I think
So we're
I,
not going to,
I think best case is 2025, but like most likely case is 2026.
that's where I was going. Like, if we're talking about, if we're being optimistic, like, hey, they're operating like a baseball organization should that's trying to win. Worst case, They blow up this draft. They don't make any moves, or they make two or three bad moves. They sit around free agency. Mike Trout comes back and doesn't play well. Rendon comes back or doesn't come back and doesn't play well. Either way, no value either way. What are we looking at here?
Well, that's where you really start to bring up the point of I wonder if the Angels will let Perry even do that. Like because if they don't make any moves at the deadline and they finish, with their 70, 71 wins like they normally do somewhere in there, I don't see Perry taking this org to the next year. I see them getting a new GM, which typically new GMs, they like to make a lot of moves because they want to make sure they get their guys in and get rid of the guys from the old org that they don't like. So I don't really see that scenario happening where you have a team that is literally dead man walking. They don't make any moves at the deadline. They don't make any moves in free agency, and they have a bad draft. I think you'll see if they don't make any moves at the deadline, you'll see a new GM and he'll make some moves. Now, will those moves be good? We don't know, but I don't see them just sitting on their hands if they bring in a new GM.
Right. So there you have. There's our episode of the day, folks. Just talking about the future. This weekend, while we're heading towards July 4th, they have Oakland tonight and July 3rd. Go catch a ball game. Maybe they'll win. In the meantime, follow Jared on X. He's not here today. Jared_Tims. Follow Nate Green 34. Follow me at DC Apollo. Follow the show at Talking Halos. Please, for the love of all that's good and holy, message us. Let us know your thoughts, your questions. We'd love to answer them on the show. You can email us at talkin, TALKIN, halos@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, positive and negative. We got big shoulders. We can handle criticism, but we more than likely want to hear your feedback on your thoughts on where this team's going. We're out of here. Have a great one.